The Command Show is supported by Tablet Command, built by firefighters to deliver accountability, situational awareness, and clarity on every call. Take command with Tablet Command at tabletcommand.com. Welcome, everybody, to the Command Show with Anthony Kastros, Brian Brush, and our special guest, Nick Ledin. We are excited to talk about saving lives and tactics today. And before we jump in, I want to thank our sponsor, Tablet Command. Tablet Command is a very, very important tool that we love and will help us do our job more effectively and efficiently. We also like to start our shows with the NIOSH 5. NIOSH 5 is not just line of duty death causal factors, but also when we miss victims, when we have bad fires, when things go sideways, we have exhibited fire losses, or we just suck on the fire ground, it is the NIOSH 5. So that's incident command, lack of incident command, adequate incident command or accountability, communications, risk assessment, or not having SOGs or not following the ones you have. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to my partner, Brian Brush, to introduce our guest, our esteemed colleague this morning.
Well, yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm excited about this show. Chief Kastros, it's pretty cool. I think we're a week out from us working together for a full week in Midwest City. So I'm glad to finally see you in person again and be doing some work there. But Nick, man, this is a great time to have you on the show. Nick and I go back, probably 15 years, around 2010 or something like that. I think we started kind of working together and training together. And it's cool. Just a passionate guy in the fire service. This goes back to us being together in Colorado. Now we're both in different parts of our lives in different parts of the nation, but still sharing that passion for the fire service. And now more from the drills and skills to the more intellectual stuff and data and trying to make a difference. Nick's been a part of the fire service for a long time, also in EMS, and has been with several different departments. I'll kind of let him give you a little bit of his background, but now kind of most prominently with the Firefighter Rescue Survey, taking that information and communicating it to the greater public and what we're finding out and putting it in context and providing us so much more information about outcomes of these rescues and how we can be more effective. And taking it a step further, you know, Chief Kastros and I, chapter 6 in our textbook is Tactics for Life. It's how we make tactical decisions for the lives of civilian occupants and the lives of firefighters, not just fire-based tactics. And I think that is probably the greatest transition in the fire service now, is so many of our tactical decisions were based on how it impacts the fire. But what we want to do is make those decisions based on how they're impacting victim outcomes. And Nick is taking that into his work with 1700 and NFPA 1700 and other areas. And I really just think we're doing our best behind the scenes in these nerdy areas to get this information communicated to standards and best practices and not just what we're doing in the conferences. So, Nick, thank you for joining us. We've been trying to schedule this for a long time. You're an extremely valuable resource to us all, and we're excited to have you on this platform. I hope that was an adequate picture of your contributions.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I appreciate the ask to be here today, and I'm excited to talk with both of you. I like what you said right there, Chief Brush, and it seems like it's such a small change going from, you know, how do we take care of the fire to how do we take care of the victim? But I think that small little shift is pretty darn important, and the fire service is doing a pretty good job of that. And it's nice that we are in 2025 where we have some data to back this up. So the nerds like myself and you guys can actually dig into some of the data and figure out what's working and what's not working.
And Chief Kastros, I think that this, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn for you, but I feel like that's what connected us, and that's probably what's been almost like a second spark or a second wind for you in your career, having made that mental transition as an incident commander from tactics for fire to tactics for life. And anything you want to contribute or speak on with Nick? So.
No, I'm excited to have Nick on with us. We're all kindred spirits in this endeavor to save more lives, to get back to the victim. you're right. Going back to you and I, Brian, we had originally met many years ago regarding your thesis for your master's, and then we reconnected after that awesome article you talked about regarding Firefighter Rescue Survey. And that was like, to me, that was like, oh my God, this is what I've been waiting for. I want data about victims. And I always asked myself, and I would ask the classes that I was teaching, what's the magic window of time to get a victim out to where they're going to survive? Just like the golden hour for trauma. And we all learned that in EMT school. Like, well, I know it's not an hour. What is the golden window of time to get a victim out who's going to survive? And through Firefighter Rescue Survey, now we're 6 minutes is probably the gold standard. And having that based on data over 4,000 rescues is just a game changer. It's so massive because, as you both know, and I'm glad you picked up on this, Nick. Ryan mentioned going from the fire to the victim. We had a lot of the fire service, has its trends, just like everybody else, I guess. And we trended towards just obsessing about the fire and the flames, the heat index and all that stuff. And so we had, tactics that came out of that, like transitional attack, and those are all good things. But I felt like that and many other factors like RIC and 2 out and now clean cabs were getting us away from the victim. And thank God we're getting back to the victim. And that's something we're talking about in our classes. So you're right, Brian. It has rekindled a passion that I think I knew these things intrinsically. Like back when El Camino happened, he met all the benchmarks of Firefighter Rescue Survey. We had him on the gurney at 4.5 minutes from arrival. They used VES. It was pre-knockdown, all those types of things. But it was always intrinsic. And intrinsic, experience evidence was never good enough once science started coming into the fire service at the level it was. So now that we have it, it's awesome. And so we have champions like Nick who are taking it to the next level. So I'm really thrilled to have you here today, brother.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think you guys do a good job in your chapter, in chapter 6 in your book, of talking about, kind of a slight shift potentially, but again, with big, I think big progress with just changing our view of life safety to life saving. Those 3 little letters, taking it from a noun to a verb, and adding some context to that. I think what you guys are doing is super important for the fire service, and I think it's really. You guys are explicit about the importance and why we need to do this, but I think that this is going to bear a ton of fruit for victims and fire departments downstream into the future.
Hey,
that's Nick, the goal, right? Yeah.
Hey, Nick, would you mind expanding a little bit and giving us a little bit more depth on, obviously a lot of people know you from the Firefighter Rescue Survey, but all the way back to your early work with Close the Door and ULFSRI, and then, also 1700, so we can understand where you're taking this information, what the prompts have been. I mean, I know you were a big part of those early days of communicating the power of the closed door, and even how that has grown, from that initial close before you doze to now. We're telling firefighters, we're telling everyone, close every time, close doors, keep it compartmentalized. That's a major restrictor in fire. Just a little bit more about you, if we could draw on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go way back. We'll start at kind of the beginning of the fire service, but I started my fire service journey back in 2007, the beginning of 2007, just after I got my paramedic certification. I was doing my 500 hours of ride-alongs out in Colorado, and for 125 of those hours, I was with the fire department. This was Fountain Fire Department, which is like a suburb of Colorado Springs. And I started working with the guys. I started working with Nate Len, now Chief Len, and Chief Torres, and Lieutenant Skeldum, and Willis Dean. And while I was there, I kind of thought, hey, these guys got a pretty good gig. They get to do all the EMS that I get to do. Plus, they get paid a little bit better. They get a little bit more respect throughout the community. They have a little bit better schedule than I had at the time, and thought, hey, why don't I try to volunteer with this department? So I started volunteering and go through their Fire 1, Fire 2 Academy. And I just kind of lucked into a job in the summer of 2007. And for the first year or so, I kind of skated on my medical expertise or knowledge. Expertise is the wrong word. And then one day I was told, hey, you need to cross the bay and you're going to be on the engine today. And I thought, I'm not prepared for this. So luckily I was fortunate enough to lean on guys like Torres and Skeldum. And they really kind of brought me up to where I needed to be. And so for about 6.5, 7 years, I was working in Colorado. That's where we first met. I think the first time we met was at Les Lukert conference in Nebraska, where Torres and I went there to take some classes. Fast forward another year, the wife and I decided to move back to the Midwest, which is where we grew up. And I also put in to become a member of a tech panel for UL FSRI. At the time, I was kind of writing a little bit. I was blogging and whatever, and was fortunate enough to get accepted to be part of the PPV study. This is in 2013, I believe. And through that, I met a bunch of people, actually had a podcast on fire engineering called The International Perspective with Mike Alt, Ian Bolton, Lars Algerstrad, now Axelson, and Art Arnelich, some people from outside the U.S. besides Mike, just trying to get a better grasp of the global fire service. That connection with Mike Alt led to becoming part of what we're now calling the PAC, the Public Education Advisory Committee through UL FSRI. This is really what people know us for, is kind of the close before you doze messaging or the take charge messaging when it comes to lithium ion batteries now. But we kind of have 3 or 4 pillars there. Our 4 pillars through the PAC is having exit plans or escape plans, having working smoke alarms, closing before you doze, and then the take charge campaign. And this was really kind of pushed by our group, but really specifically Chief John Schaefer out of Indiana. He was really kind of the one that kind of put the close before you doze message in front of all of us. And that is kind of the first charge that we decided to champion through the PAC. So we've been working through the PAC for, I think, 9 or 10 years now. And that timing was kind of crazy because it was actually right when we started FRS as well. So I believe, if memory serves, in 2016, that's when Firefighter Rescue Survey at FDIC in 2016, that's when Firefighter Rescue Survey started. That's also when PAC initially partnered with FSRI. We were kind of doing this on our own before we reached out to Director Kerber, and he kind of brought us into the team at FSRI. And then a couple years later, 2018 maybe, I became a member of NFPA 1700. And in 2021, we released the first edition of that, and we're getting ready to release the second edition of that if there were no NITNAMs a couple weeks ago. So the new version should be out in 2026, barring any NITNAMs, which is a confusing term that I don't fully understand, but it would mean that we would have to push back the date of the revision for another year or so. So that's kind of brief. Now I'm in Eau Claire. I work in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is a suburb. 85,000 or 75,000 people here with the students. We're up to 85, 90,000 people here during the school year. But kind of your mean and median fire department in the U.S. We got about 100 members. We are a career department. We run about 11,000 calls, most of them being EMS. And then I think so far this year, as of a couple weeks ago, I think we've had 44 fires, I think is what my chief told me a couple weeks ago. So we're not the busiest department. We're not a fire factory here. We're kind of your mean and median fire department.
Thank you, sir. Chief, I see you taking notes. Yeah,
I'm taking notes. It's impressive.
Well, Nick, one of the things I wanted to kind of lead off with is, I've been working really hard on the event frequency. The Firefighter Rescue Survey has been something that we're learning a lot about how the rescues go down. But one of my biggest angles was how many rescues. And you and I together via text message and talks and everything have put a lot of time and effort in the last year on trying to get down to how many victims are there out there during these fires. And I think we've kind of narrowed it down, and I saw it actually almost like confirmed by a U.S. Fire Administrator post. But can you speak to how many victims we're encountering at structure fire? How many? Yeah, you know what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the most shocking data pieces that we've been able to discover that needs to be communicated to, how often we're finding people in these fires, because you just said, we run about 44 fires a year, but I think as this number gets driven home to people, more and more departments are going to need to understand that they need to expect these fire victims more frequently than they probably had anticipated.
Yeah, so I leaned very heavily on your work with the Fireground Civilian Research Rescue Project. So for the first, if you guys aren't familiar, for the first 3 months, the first quarter of 2021, Chief Brush really tried to figure out how many rescues we're making. He hopped on board with FRS, and we were trying to capture kind of where we were making rescues, when we were making rescues, how we were making rescues. Chief Brush wanted to kind of fill in that missing piece of how many rescues we were making. So what he found out, and I'll let him maybe explain this, is that we were making quite a few rescues in the fire service. So in the U.S. Fire Service up till today, the only data that we have on how many rescues that we are making comes from the work of Chief Brush. And so what we found out is that we were making about 10 rescues a day, 9.8 rescues a day, 881 rescues in the first 90 days across the U.S. Fire Service. We know that number is underreported, but we just don't know by how much. So what I did is I took that data. I tried to get similar data from NFPA and USFA for how many fires we actually made and how many civilian deaths there were from fires in that time period. And so extrapolating some of this data, for the first 90 days of 2021, what we figured out is that there was, on average, and now I'm taking Brush's numbers for the number of people that were rescued, and then I'm also adding in, and there's a little bit of overlap, but we tried to do our best. I've explained this in an article called Recalculating Risk and Reward that was published by Fire Engineering. And what we did is we overlaid those two numbers, and what we found out is for every 63 fires, there was somebody trapped that needed to be rescued by the fire department. So on average, 1 out of every 63 fires. So for my fire department, that's about once a year that we're going to have a fire where somebody is trapped. And then we have some new information from, I haven't actually been able to connect with Dr. Denise Smith on this, but she did kind of a perimortem or postmortem on NIFRs, looking at some USFA data. And what she did is she went back and she pulled all of the death certificates from people across the US in these fires. And she had found out that we are actually underreporting the number of fire deaths in the US by as much as 50%. So let's say that we're losing about 3,000 people a year in residential structure fires. That number might be as high as about 4,500. So if we take that new number from her, now we can try to figure out, estimating here, that number doesn't go to 1 in every 63 fires, but maybe it's as low as 1 in every 48 fires. So that would be once a year for a department that's my size, which again is kind of your mean and median of the U.S. Fire Service.
Absolutely. And it's only confirmed by the residential death rate per 1,000 fires, that continues to climb, so when we're looking at taking this data and, oh yeah, Nick found this, well, we're going to triangulate it with other pieces. And over the last 30 years, the civilian death rate per 1,000 fires continues to climb. And that right now is sitting around 9.8 per 1,000 residential fires. It's going to click over to 10 per 1,000. That makes it 1 per 100. So we have 1 civilian fire fatality per 100 fires. It would make sense based on our survivability rates that we're seeing, victims who are surviving these fires. So a victim per fire. And I think the most important part is, like you're saying, Nick, I mean, a lot of departments, a ton of departments are running between 50 and 100 structure fires a year. So we just have to face it that if you are a chief of a fire organization, if you are a firefighter, your time is coming. And that frequency could be as much as, hey, every year we're going to encounter a fire victim or possibly more. We need to be ready for this. It isn't this, kind of long lost idea. And we're better prepared to intervene anymore with fire-based EMS. This is not the early 80s and the 90s where they were dead before you got here, kid, or we're pulling out charcoal bodies. These victims are are, potentially savable, and to a high degree, especially with all the interventions we have today. So we have to focus on being those lifesavers.
I think a good thing to talk about here, and this is a bit of a false dichotomy here, but when we're talking about safety and saving, for a lot of people, safety means the firefighters, saving means the victims, which again, you guys are explicit that these are not mutually exclusive. But just to put some of this in context, that very soon, or we're right there anyways, that the number of deaths is now being measured for every 100 fires for civilian deaths. Whereas the number of firefighter fatalities, and these are all horrible, and thank you for talking about the NIOSH 5 to lead this off, as always. But also we're looking at about the numbers that I ran was we have a firefighter fatality, one every 80,506 fires. On average over a 7-year period, where I could get good information from Bill Carey, from the USFA, from the NFPA as well. So again, these are not mutually exclusive. But I think just as a mindset, we're talking about many orders of magnitude now, from hundreds to tens of thousands.
Yep. Go ahead, Brian.
And they're a divergent trend, like the firefighter safety is on the rise because the death rate is declining. The civilian safety is on the decline because the death rate is rising. And I know Chief is chomping at the bit. His pencil has been on fire. His mind is going. So rather than you and I nerd out all day long like we do, Chief, why don't you chime in with your experience and your gray hair here? So,
well, it's just music to my ears. I could listen to this all day long. I love it. A couple of things I want to speak to. One is, Nick, I look at the trajectory of your career, and what you've accomplished was not possible in my generation. I started the fire service in 1987. So there was no internet. There was no social media. There were no blogs. There were no, none of this stuff. And what I love that technology has given us is brilliant minds like yourself who are dedicated and passionate, but it's given you a voice to get out there much faster than my generation could. In my generation, you had to be on the job 20 years before anybody would let you teach anything, right? And now you've got guys like yourself who are brilliant, who have passion, who can have access to data, who care about the data, and get it out and then become part of these networks and groups that are just exponentially getting better information out to us. What I've noticed over the past 5 years is the fire service has gone from resistant to this kind of information to embracing it. And that's with retirements. It's my brother, both my brothers in the fire service when I was a kid growing up. And I've always learned a lot from them. And one of them had coined this, and I don't think it was his phrase, but change happens to retirement, or change happens to the fire service one retirement at a time, right? And so we're at this point now, though, where the pendulum has swung back to the victim. And that's what I love. That's why we're here. And it's also swung from safety to saving. And that's the other thing. And I was literally teaching classes up this past 6 weeks. I've been all over the place. And, they're still saying life safety because it's just rote memory. And I break down why is saving more important. And we talk about things like, thermal imaging cameras, which are a great tool. But if, like, in the hands of a crappy EMT, a drug box is a pretty lethal tool. In the hands of a crappy firefighter, a tick is pretty worthless because you over-rely upon it. You don't know what you're doing. So you have to understand the BLS and tactile search before you worry about the ALS, which would be a thermal imaging camera. You add to that the albeit data-based, but I think overcorrection of transitional attack, saying, hey, it's a great tactic, but what are we not doing? One of the things I like to tell people is, look, nothing's free on the fireground. If you're doing this, you're not doing that. Most departments don't have, 4 or 5 members on a rig. So I was just with a department that has 2O staffing. Other departments, 3O is the average. But if you're doing something over here, it's not this over here, and that's typically not getting in the building and getting to the victim. So you guys are articulating very well this reversal of trend where the safety to saving equals the 1 in 80,506. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
80,000. So that versus 1 in 48, 1 in 50. It's like, this is an exponential problem. And when you show that graphic on our classes, that we're actually having significantly fewer fires in homes, but significantly higher deaths in those fires, that rattles firefighters. Like, I didn't realize that. I didn't know that. And so then that gives you the anchor point from which to speak about not only tactics, but command, tactics, and tasks. And then everything matters. And that's what our motto is, training saves lives. I'm sorry, training saves seconds, seconds save minutes, minutes save lives. Everything matters. Like a football team that's trying to scrap and get inches as they go down the football field, we're scrapping for seconds on the fire ground. Faster, more efficient, more effective, less wasted time, less wasted radio traffic, less wasted effort, less miscues, hitting the stretch at the right place, the right time, getting the victim profile. So what's nice is now we're getting into this granular level of discussion about things like victim profile versus survivability profile, saving versus safety. We're getting this granular discussion in these classes. I was just at Clackamas, Oregon, home of one of our dear friends, and who is passionate about rescue. And, that's his home turf. So we're talking about a lot about this whole, okay, why is victim profiling slowing us down or speeding us up? And what is the interpretation of it? If it's low, do you go slow? Absolutely not. That's the message we want to get is because now bright minds like you are asking really good questions, asking and analyzing data, and not letting old farts like me get away with some slogan and not call me out on it. So if we talk about victim profile, those like yourself who are really analytical and diving into this stuff, like Justin McWilliams, they're going to ask and push back and say, hey, doesn't low victim profile mean we're going to go slow and not make it a priority? Absolutely not. That's not the intent at all. And that was a discussion we had in Clackamas last week was if I say low victim profile, I'm not saying it's not a priority. I'm not saying rescue and search isn't a priority. I'm sure as hell not saying go slow and take your time and don't worry about it. It's just a different mindset when you look at it from an incident commander standpoint versus the guy on a rescue or on a truck who just wants to go bad out of hell, which is what you want. But as the incident commander, the buck stops with you, and you have to constantly balance your firefighters with the civilians. And even though captains think that, when you're at the task level and you're inside of the building, you're not thinking about the big picture. And that's why you have to have these predetermined decision points. So I don't want to dive too far into that right now. I'll talk about it later, but that's what I'm thinking right now. I just love listening to you guys talk. So
I love that. I appreciate in this chapter, you touch on a handful of things. Obviously it's called aggressive command and tactics for life, but I like when you guys talk about kind of just this rescue mindset. I think that overarching, combined with the tactics for life really sets the stage for where our priorities are and where our priorities should be as well. So kudos for you guys for being very explicit. I think speaking to the tactics, for life, I hadn't seen this before you guys anywhere where it was written down and preached. But not only are you talking about rescue and attack and ventilation, which I've seen multiple times, some version of this triangle offense, but you also throw in the medical branch as well. And I think that is oftentimes the missing piece or kind of an afterthought. So if you guys could just maybe talk about why it's not an afterthought, why it's a forethought for you guys. And are you noticing when you guys go out and teach this that for too many departments, it is kind of an afterthought? They're throwing their medic unit inside the fire as opposed to having maybe another medic crew standing by ready to receive a victim, or as Chief Brush's information found out, oftentimes victims, 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's definitely happening. Go ahead, Brian. Kick this one off because this is a big one.
This has kind of been an interesting one for me because, I've worked in a fire-based EMS department. And, we actually, even to the point of the double company houses that had an engine and an ambulance, they just had 3 on the engine and 2 on the ambulance. And we kind of, said, well, that in their first due, their effective firefighting force is 5, so it was like, again, we're basing our staffing on firefighting, which is very important, where we had standalone engine companies, they were 4 people, but the first due medic was firefighters, and that is important. They would be assisting in that stretch. They would be a part of the search. As soon as we hit the fire room, those 2 medics would peel off and be starting the search. And that is critical. But it was not, inherent that there would be another ambulance coming to the fire. And that kind of took some time for us to develop. So that way you had a ambulance there for firefighting, but then there was also an ambulance there for medical. Now, moving to Oklahoma, and it's not a fire-based EMS system. It's a third-party EMS. This is one where it's, that's really not our thing. That's their thing. And that's where, I think that this is a critical discussion piece for all involved parties, whether you're fire-based EMS, are you truly deploying resources for medical? Because fire department is your first name, and that's kind of where you think. And then on top of it, areas like us, EMS is a third party. They're outside of our communication system. They're outside of our standard operating procedures. And really since, I'd say probably the last 3 years here, we've made a really concerted effort to make it clear to EMS where we want them, how we want them ready to receive, getting them familiar with, even to the point of I now teach a basic class at their paramedic academy, their new EMS employee academy. Here's Alpha, here's Bravo, here's Delta, here's Charlie. Here's the terminology that we're using. The fire department carries the cyano kits, not the EMS system, because we want them at the fires. We don't want that cyano kit on an ambulance that is not going to arrive there. So it is critically important, in that chain of survival that everybody's familiar with. EMS is the ones getting them from the fire scene to the emergency room door, and it's a critical component. I know Chief Kastros worked in a fire-based EMS system. I know that a lot of the stuff, specifically from my research, we have to treat these as a MCI kind of approach, because not only will you have potential more fire victims, but you got firefighters going all out to get these victims. So we need to anticipate more patients. And that even falls back to, again, confirmation from the Phoenix RIT study, and their things. It's like, what we didn't glean from that is that a firefighter down is also a fire victim. And, he was a fire victim, and it often created more maydays, which would be more fire victims and all these things. So at the root of it, you have to think about patients, and patients need triage, treatment, and transport. So I do see a transition and a more proactive approach to EMS. And fortunately, when we go and deliver these programs, that's probably the thing that we get the most feedback on, at least me, is these departments. Hey, we're now sending 2 ambulances to our structure fires. We're now sending, 2 ambulances and an EMS supervisor to our apartment fires. And I think that that's what we need to really consider. No different than, let's be honest, most of the fire service responses are built around a room and contents fire. We deliver a whole first alarm, but that's really only going to handle a room and contents fire. If it's beyond that, you need more resources coming. If it's beyond one patient, or if it's hot day, any of these things that we've taken into account. But we've been ignorant to think that EMS is not, again, one of the biggest parts of the fire scene. And we just are doing a better job of communicating that today. And maybe that's because there's a greater acceptance in the fire service today. Again, to Chief Kastros' point of versus 20 years ago, where it was kind of something that was around us, but not something that we truly took ownership of.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we were just in New England, and, they don't have their own fire-based EMS. They're not on the same radio frequency. There's not a lot of ambulances in their counties, and it's like you're behind the curveball right before you even get the dispatch. Versus where I grew up, Metro Fire, we had 10 to 12 fire-based ambulances plus single role plus private. And I could just keep calling ambulances and medic units all I wanted. However, the incident commander needs to think about EMS early. If it's not part of your initial alarm, it should be automatic. Make that change or call out a working fire to get that ambulance coming or medic unit coming. Where I learned this was the hard way. We responded to an apartment fire one day, middle of the afternoon, weekday, working apartment fire. And as I back into the command post location, a sheriff officer comes up and says, "Yeah, he's inside." And I go, "Yeah, I got a couple of them inside." I'm thinking firefighters. He's thinking civilian. And he goes, "No, he should be in the bedroom." He said something that made me go, "Is there a fire victim?" He goes, "Yeah." Just very casual, like we should have known. It's like him walking up to a bank and me going, "Yeah, he's in there." And then he being an active shooter, real casual, right? And so about the time I realize what's going on, I look up and who's bringing the victim out in full turnouts on SCBA's? The medic crew. Because to your point, Brian, it was an engine medic that arrived, fire-based. It's a two-piece, 5-person engine. So those firefighters and the medic are pulling the victim out. And to her credit, the firefighter medic on that crew that pulled him out intubated the same guy that she rescued while still on her SCBA. She was like, just hardcore, man, like right on. But where was their medic parked? It was parked out of the way, because what we preached for years, park your ambulance, get the hell out of the way, right? And so it's a complete mental paradigm shift that Nick's talking about. And it's something that we have to ingrain into our incident commanders and the way they think, and the whole fire department, the way they think about EMS, because it's kind of like having a pitcher with no catcher. It's like if the victim is the ball and the rescuers say, "Here you go," and they throw the victim out on the lawn and there's nobody to catch the victim and treat them, they're going to die. And I use the analogy that, a football team, anytime you see a football player who's got the football and he's running towards the end zone, he gets to the 20, the 15, the 10, and he starts celebrating at about the 10 or 5 yard line. What happens? He either gets caught or he fumbles the ball. He doesn't make the touchdown. Don't celebrate until you're in the end zone being the hospital. That's when you say, "Okay, we did everything we could." Okay. Don't spike the ball on the 5 yard line. Don't spike the victim in the front yard and ask for a freaking medal. You're only halfway done. So yeah, big important shift we need to have.
Yeah, we discussed this. We try to give that analogy of the fire attack line is the first line. That's supported by a backup line. That's supported by a hydrant with a continuous water supply. So fire attack has all these layers of support and continuity. And really, if we're initiating a search, it needs to be supported with medical, because the whole reason why you're searching is in anticipation of finding a victim. That needs to go to medical and it needs to be transported. So,
yeah, or like a water supply. Why are we getting a water supply? Because we're anticipating a long firefight. Yeah. We're anticipating the need for waters. It's the same thing.
Nick, Chief Kastros talked about that golden hour for fire victims, and he touched on the 6-minute gold standard. I mean, again, this is a sweet spot of yours, and for people tuning in or may not have heard it, can you expand on that time to patient, removal time, some of those parts about what plays into not just that 6 minutes, because that's one of the most recent pieces of information to this puzzle is the new search study, finding that actually being slower in the removal and keeping them lower in the atmosphere has a much higher success rate as far as the survivability versus that smash and grab, throw them over our shoulder, backdraft rescue that we may have been trained for earlier in our careers.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance here, and I think you brought up kind of two pieces right here. And the way that I kind of break some of this down is we talk about duration, we talk about elevation, we also talk about isolation, medication, I miss location as well as far as your proximity to the fire. But as far as duration, this is something that we know. This is just time inside the fire building for a civilian. We've known kind of intuitively for generations, and this is, my kids are aware of this, civilians are aware of this, that the longer somebody's inside, the worse off they are. That's why we have lights and sirens. That's why we have opticoms. That's why we stage our gear the way that we stage our gear. That's why we train so hard. This is something that we've intuitively known for generations. Now is the first time where we actually have some not only experiential data from FRS, but experimental data from FSRI, where we can really say that this is not just correlated, but this is causal in effect. The longer somebody's in that environment, the worse off it is. Again, this is kind of commonsensical, but now we actually have data to reinforce this belief of ours. So the shorter the time that somebody's inside, everything else being equal, I know some people have a problem with that statement right there, but if everything else is equal, the longer you are inside, the worse off you're going to be. I think we can all kind of understand that. There are a couple small caveats to that. Whereas if I'm bringing somebody out at the 5-foot level or the 3-foot level, but a couple seconds faster, it's probably worse off for that victim as opposed to if I'm underneath that smoke or in the intake side of this bidirectional flow path. So if they're breathing cool, clean air down low at the 1-foot level, as opposed to smoky, soot-filled air at the 3-foot level, it's going to be worse. And that's exactly what played out in FSRI's experiments. Again, there's a small limitation to what FSRI was looking at in that it was a single-story structure, so the fire was on that level. Does this change if the victim's above the fire? Does this change based on what that flow path might be? Are they in the intake? Are they in the exhaust portion of that flow path? And then also to your point, what about isolation? What happens if we have a single-story ranch house, which I think most people could understand? We got fire in the living room, and we find them in kind of the hallway back by the bedrooms. So do you take them back through that dirty hallway, back through the dirty entryway to get out of the structure? Or do I take them, move them over 1 foot, close that door? Now I can ventilate and isolate and wait for a couple seconds. It might take me a little bit longer to get this person out, but I brought them into a cleaner atmosphere sooner. Obviously, we can't really assess our patient very well. We can sometimes tell if they're dead, or not dead, or if they're breathing or not breathing when we do that. But we can't really do a whole lot to either assess nor treat this patient in there. So there's always these give and takes, as you talked about. But I think as a general rule of thumb, if we can bring them away from the fire and away from the smoke, that's better off. If we can also get them out sooner, if we can do both those things, that's going to be ideal. So keeping them low in the space we know is important. There was a statement, and what they did for FSRI's experiments is they brought somebody out slow and low, so 3 times slower, but at the 1 foot level, versus fast and high. So now they're going 3 times faster at the 3 foot level. And it was worse to bring the person out faster and higher. So slow and low won in these experiments. So there's a little bit of nuance right here. So that's one thing that when we talk about this, we typically search in crews of 2 in my department. And assuming that we only find 1 victim right here, as soon as my partner finds a victim, they're going to holler out victim, victim, victim. My job as his partner or her partner is to go make contact and literally take a step back, literally take a deep breath in, and just slow down for 1 second and then try to figure out what the best route of removal is. Because we know as we're interviewing people on these Grabs podcasts that everyone's first thought when they find a victim is, oh, crap, there's a victim right here. And so now they're thinking in the black, they're psychologically stressed, they're physically stressed, they're not thinking maybe quite as clearly as they could be. So instead of this rote memory of how most of us have trained for most of our career, bringing them out the way we came in, I just want someone to take a second and just think, all right, what's the best route of removal right now? That's the first thought if I'm the partner for this person. I don't need to call on the radio yet. I don't need to do anything. I just need to figure out, are we going to isolate and wait? Are we going back out the door we came in? Or is there some other way that we're going to try to get out of here? Once we figure that first step out, then we can hop on the radio and start making our movements to get out of this structure. So nuance here as far as isolation, as a general rule of thumb, if I can isolate and wait, isolate and ventilate and wait, I'm probably helping that victim out. If I can get them out faster, it's probably helping that victim out, knowing that I'm also keeping them as low as possible and as clean as possible. So clean, low, and fast, that's the gold standard. But sometimes you have to choose between some of those because it's not always clean, low, and fast or high, dirty, and slow. So there's a little bit of a balancing act right there. And that's where some of this nuance and some of this thinking before the fire can really do a whole lot of good for the fire department. And then more importantly, the civilians that we are sworn to protect.
And, I think
kind of a rambling statement there, but I try to touch on 3 of these important pieces: the duration, the location, elevation, and duration, isolation, not location. Sorry, ramble.
No, it's perfect. And I think, when we're trying to communicate this to some of our incumbents, guys who've been doing this a long time and trying to get them to change their thinking, a lot of us went through a lot of RIT training. 10 years ago, there was just a lot of RIT training. And the focus on contacting that firefighter was always the air first. Like let's secure the air, let's get them air, all this type of stuff before we even think about the rescue. Well, it's no different with our civilian victims. Consider the air in the atmosphere first and then the removal. Well, we can't put them on a mask. We can't do buddy breathing, but we get them into a compartment where where at least the environment's not getting worse. Then we can assess, or like you said, take a window, get fresh air to them rather than getting them out of the space. And we know residential structure fires, a lot of times they are knocked down within a minute or two. So getting them into a bedroom, getting fresh air, keeping them low, protecting them in some way, shape, or form, that protect in place is something that we probably need to give greater consideration to. And that is proving out in the Firefighter Rescue Survey information as well. Another piece for this is once we find a victim, I want someone on the radio letting everybody else on scene know. There's two pieces of information where it really is important for coordination between attack and search or attack and rescue. And that's victim, victim, victim. And if I have a nozzle in my hand at that point in time, I'm going to open up that nozzle right there just to bring clean, cool, fresh air in. And if they're removing the victim behind me, I'm making their path better for them. The other piece is water on the fire. If I'm searching and we haven't found a victim yet and I hear water on the fire, that's our cue to that's our clue to verify that temperatures are decreasing. And now we can probably get a little bit looser with our search and search a little bit more effectively and efficiently, hopefully. And ventilation as well. We have when we have water on the fire in our department, that's usually the cue to start opening up as much as possible. We're not as concerned about the vent feed. Now we want that lift and lean. Yeah, and same thing for us in our department is once we get knocked down on that fire, or if we have knockdown and we haven't started it yet, we're going to start hydraulically ventilating if we have a nozzle. If somebody has a nozzle in their hand, they're going to break glass and they're going to start flowing out that window to try to clean as much of this air as possible.
Fantastic. It's all the stuff you guys are talking about historically has been in a silo. The truck guys do their thing, the engine guys do their thing, incident commanders and chiefs do their thing, and rarely do they cross-pollinate, right? You can go to conferences, and we still do, right? Making engines great again and all that kind of stuff. And we still have that, but the astute fire department realizes that these things are all interconnected. You can't have your rescue gurus doing one thing and your engine gurus doing something else. Your incident commander's not doing either one. They're just showing up and hoping that they, sound good on the radio. That's just not good enough anymore. There has to be an ingrained mindset where we're all interconnected. When I was coming up, my first ops chief told us, if you don't see me, that means you're doing a good job. If you see me, it's because you're in trouble or screwed up. So first, I never wanted to see that guy again, And so that was the mindset. And we never, ever, ever trained with them, ever. Because that wasn't their mindset. The chiefs never trained with the crews. And then you get training that was prescribed by the training division. But again, the battalion chiefs never trained with their crews. Well, who are you going to be commanding on a fire? Your crews, the crews that you want to have dinner with, that you want to cook your dinner and do your reports for you. What about training with them? And that was the paradigm shift that we had to have. And that's where the curriculum had to go. And that's why our book went that direction, that you have to have strategy and tactics. That triangle that's in the book, strategy and tactics is the meat and potatoes of any fireground operation, but you have to have incident command, and you have to have SOGs, and they have to all come together. And so having that training and those discussions to nauseam even, because it's fun and it's important shit. I've talked with Justin for hours about this stuff, and it's fun, and we break it apart. But better to do it then and get on the same page and come to a consensus and train together on it than to have that discussion after a fire where somebody died and we are going to argue whose fault it was. Okay, we have to have synergy, and we have to be the incident commanders have to be an integral part of that training, that mindset, those discussions, because if they're not, they are no longer incident commanders; they're incident observers, and they're just playing catch up. And so, because everything you guys talked about. Whether it's a window-initiated search, whether it's hydraulic ventilation after knockdown, victim, fire, water on the fire, all that stuff can either be enhanced and streamlined by the incident commander or hampered by the incident commander. Where the incident commander slows things down, talks too much, asks too many questions, and is trying to learn on the fire ground what their crews are actually doing. That's no longer acceptable. And I think the fire service is getting that. I think the fire service is figuring that out. So, for example, going back to victim profiling, one of the misnomers, and I told the guys at Clackamas I was going to write a cleanup article about victim profiling, because one of the misperceptions is, again, low means it's a low priority. That's not at all. So as an incident commander, you're thinking differently, but in concert with your truck or your rescue or whoever's doing the search, right? You're supporting them. But you also have engine companies, medical to think about, ventilation to think about, the homeowner or RP. There's all kinds of additional things. But when it comes to the tactical space and that tactical gap, that's where you decentralize as much as you can. Decentralize. That's why we set up groups and division supervisors. Those are your ambassadors on the fire ground as the incident commander. So like Brian did on his rescue, where the chief's, Brian's, I'm going to do a 360. Basically, Brian's like, I'm going to fill the gap. I'm going to go figure out where to fill the gap, where to bridge the gap. And he found the guys are doing window initiated search. It was a high victim profile because you had a car in the driveway of a house, but you didn't have it confirmed. But because of the high, you guys were aggressive. You guys did a window initiated search. And you tactically gravitated to support that operation. And they said victim, victim, victim. It didn't get out on the radio, but you heard it face to face and were able to bridge that gap and get medical coming and support. And that reduced time to task. All this stuff is intertwined. And historically, I remember going to classes, going to conferences, and having all this cool training. And our chiefs knew not a clue what we were doing. They had no idea what we were doing. We were going to implement all this cool shit. They had no idea what we were doing. They just kind of played catch up, and we would call it copy command. We would tell them what we're doing, copy. Tell them what we're doing, copy. They were not ahead of the incident, paving the runway for us to get the victim out, or paving the runway to get the medic off the scene, or anything for that matter, and not coordinating. So, what I appreciate is that folks, like you guys are coming up, and now are being chief officers and fire chiefs, and are realizing the value and the importance of integrating the incident commander, the tactical, the task levels in our training and in our mindset. Because when the fire happens, we cannot operate in silos. So I just want to throw that out there.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you just said. And I think both the two of you guys and then also Justin McWilliams is doing a great job of kind of bridging that training gap where the guys, the captains and below, are all doing X, and then the duty chiefs, battalion chiefs, whoever else might be a chief on scene, they're having their own siloed things, but to make sure that we're cross-pollinating between the two so that the chiefs, the incident commanders or division and group supervisors, however that's filled in your departments, are working with the guys and girls that are on the line.
Yeah, and it's vital. And it's real quick, Brian. That's why things like victim profile, if a department decides to institute that terminology, everyone needs to understand what it means. We say low, everyone knows what that means. It does not mean all clear. It does not mean we're not searching. And it sure as hell does not mean we're not aggressive or we're not going to hurry. It doesn't mean that. It just means that our best information is it's a low chance of a victim. Yes, we're going to still search if the other conditions allow it. If it's a Home Depot and it's light smoke and everyone's reported out of the structure, we're going to call that a low victim profile, but we're still going to search it. If it's a house fire with room and contents at 2 a.m, it's a high victim profile. We're still going to search it. The difference is that low and high is what we have to start with as far as what do we have to gain. How much am I willing to pony up on this fire? If I go to a house fire in Metro where I worked, it's 24 firefighters on a house fire. That's when I'm anting up into this fire. That's what I'm risking. I know that going in. What I don't know is what the potential for victims is. And if we have just a starting point where low is someone tells you that everyone's out, a credible witness, sane and sober, says everyone's out, doesn't mean we're going to call it all clear. It doesn't mean we're not searching. But if I have a low victim profile and it's a true value hardware store with fire through the roof and black smoke pumping out of every single orifice, guess what? Low gain, low risk. Sorry, as the IC, we're going to probably go defensive. Okay, that's part of that algorithm. Moderate means it's a moderate or higher potential for civilian life. We're going to push a little further. And this has impacts on other ancillary issues that command has to think about. For example, 2 out. Are we going to have a 2-out line or not? Are we going to have a backup line or not? Are we going to wait or not? That a lot of fire departments don't do 2-out. They don't think about 2-out. Other ones are obsessed with 2-out and are very, very conservative with their tactics. So they'll have a 2-out line before they even have an attack line. So you go around the nation, you're going to have a ton of different interpretations of what the 2-out is, the 1910-1-3-4s, and how do we implement that? And one of the thresholds we use is if it's a lower moderate victim profile, then you could maybe have 2-out. But if it's higher confirmed, then we're going to bypass 2-out. We're going to supersede it. And high would be like Brian had, a house with a car in the driveway. There are some incident commanders who are afraid to let crews go into that without a 2-out line. That's not okay. Get your ass in there. Now, if that thing is blowing through the roof and fire out every orifice, and if there's a car in the driveway, it's a little different animal than what Brian had when he had fire on the front end and he had smoke in the back. So all these things are intertwined. And it's never, the intent of victim profiling was never, ever, ever to prevent searching or slow searching down. It was always to get them in there as fast as possible with more information. Because one of the things you guys discovered with Firefighter Rescue Survey was that the more we know about the victim, the greater chance of survival. And victim profiling isn't just low, moderate, high confirmed. It's signal, species, incapacity, gender, number, age, location. That 10-second assessment from a bystander, from an RP, from a parent is going to save us valuable time to get to the victim the right time the first time, instead of going from the front door or doing something else. So it's all intertwined, fellas. I'm doing the IC's geek version of what you guys are doing. So sorry.
No, I mean, I think there's an important piece here, and back to, the focus of this, we're talking about Chapter 6, Tactics for Life. And when we put it together, Chief Kastros had asked several times, like, do we really need to go this deep on this stuff? And I said, absolutely. The fire service is largely seniority based, and the people in the upper end of the command decision-making processes, the organizational decision-making processes, are people who were not imprinted with this deep of understanding of fire dynamics and victim outcomes when they came into the fire service. And, unfortunately, ego gets in the way, and a lot of times they don't want to hear it from their people, from those lower level informal leaders. So we need to provide a deep hard drive update in this chapter. And it's important too, as we did in the textbook, we provided side-by-side slides. Nick, you're very familiar with them. You've helped me out with those as far as what UL is saying and what the Firefighter Rescue Survey is saying, and how those come together serve as really good foundations for SOPs and SOGs. And that's what we've used in our department. And to Chief Kastros's point, that you have to think organizationally with this, because SOPs and SOGs are how these things get institutionalized in your organization. And I still think I'm not allowed in LA County, because I attended a LA County Fire Chiefs Association conference. And we went down the list and we said, hey, what is your drive for your SOPs? Well, first due engine stretches the line. Second due engine supports them. First due truck goes to the roof. And I said, okay, well, where is search? And it was a 4th or 5th assignment. With reflex time and everything, I laid it out. And I said, this is unfortunate. Your tactics are for fire. Your tactics are not for life. And your tactics are being driven by standard operating procedure and guidelines, and not by seeing information. It's really, really tough. I mean, and we have to find humility, and we have to understand that we are here for saving people from fires, not just extinguishing fires. And so to Chief Kastros's point, please take this information not just to, drive home or confirm your VES plan or your aggressive company level decisions. Take this information to your organization, get it into implementation of SOPs and SOGs, because really what we're talking here, we do not want this level of aggression to be sustained for 2 hours of the incident. We're focusing on the front end of the incident. We're front loading the front end of the incident in these residential structure fires where we're having the greatest civilian life loss, where we can make the greatest impact in the shortest period of time. And then we can adjust everything beyond after that 10 minutes, those reassessments, those deeper things as benchmarks are being met. But we have to be all in on the first 10. That is what we need to focus on in these residential structure fires to prevent the 1 in 100 fires to be going to 1 in 50 fires, and us to continue to lose civilian lives. Because as Chief Kastros said, when firefighters see it in the room, you should take it personal. It should be a direct reflection of our operations is not meeting this need and not making a difference in civilian lives.
I really like what you say. I'm just going to piggyback and just throw an exclamation point on what you said right there. And you guys do such a good job of talking about tactics for life, tactics for fire. Jeff Rothmeyer in his book, Mastering the Craft, does a great job of talking about civilian focused versus firefighter focused. Again, kind of that safety saving differentiation as well, where for him, it's search, attack, and ventilation, and medication or medical are kind of the victim focused or civilian focused, whereas 2 out, water supply, backup line, all these other things are maybe a second line as well, are all kind of firefighter focused things. But you brought up the importance of making sure that this is at an operational level. I'd expand that just a slightly bit further. It needs to be organizational level. It needs to be organizational, operational, and individual at all 3 levels. The individual level, we're talking about the mindset. The operational level, we're talking about the mission. And then at the organizational level, we're talking about the methods. So individual, operational, organizational, we have mindset, mission, and methods. So this needs to be holistic when we're approaching this from the top down and the bottom up.
And that's I love that you said that, because that's strategic tactical task, right? Strategic tactical task, whether it's organizational or on the incident, there's a strategic, tactical, and task level, right? All 3 have to be in alignment. All 3 have to be on the same page. Just like a human body has to be in alignment, like we had that little picture in the book. You have to have all 3 in alignment. If the IC is not thinking the same thing as the tactical supervisors are not thinking the same thing to support what the crews are doing, then you're out of alignment and you're going to have bad things happen and that could include missing a civilian victim. And that's the last thing we want. So let's close this up. We've been at it for over an hour. This is pretty awesome. We could probably go for 5 more hours. But why don't we let you wrap us up? Nick, any closing comments or thoughts?
No, real quick, since we're here, if you haven't read the book, please go read the book, Mastering Fireground Command by Chief Kastros and Chief Brush. It's a great book. Guy. As somebody who is kind of straddling the tactical and task level with the tactical and strategic level, whereas I'm a captain, so I'm getting hands dirty. I have a crew that I'm overseeing right now, but also I'm acting as a battalion chief. And I just had the first fire where I was command a week or 2 ago, I think on the 13th of last month, I guess almost a month ago now. This book has been super helpful for me. And that's something that our department over the past couple of years has really been focusing on, filling that tactical gap. So kudos to you guys for kind of teaching us from afar, indirectly, how we can better do that for ourselves.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that a lot. We're all just puppets in the same sick play, baby. We're all just trying to help each other, and help the public. Brian, any closing thoughts?
No, Nick, thank you for adding depth to the discussion today and all you do in so many areas. You know, being a more behind the scenes guy myself, it's just the role that I think, you know, over time I need to be playing more, being a part of these NFPA committees, being a part of TEX, being a part of ULFSRI. It's not the flashy stuff, but it has sustaining value, and it is guiding our future, and getting this stuff towards best practices on a national level is important, whether it is through that textbook or it is through the panels that you contribute to. So thank you very much for not just being a great contributor to the fire service, but being one of my close confidants and great friends. And I look forward to probably chatting with you in a text in the near future as well, buddy.
Yeah, thank you. And while we're here on Fire Engineering's platform right now, more behind the scenes stuff, Justin McWilliams and I are finishing up the search chapter for fire engineering's Fire 1, Fire 2 textbooks right now. And I don't know who's writing all the chapters, but the people that are writing the chapters that I'm familiar with that kind of have a little bit of cross-pollination over each other are some of the people that I would look up to. So kudos for fire engineering for going to get the guys and gals that they think are really kind of pushing the fire service in those domains.
Amen to that. And speaking of fire engineering, thank you to Fire Engineering for making this podcast available and all the ones like it. And also, again, thank you to Tablet Command, our esteemed sponsor. Tablet Command, it really gets it. It was literally made by firefighters for firefighters in the wake of a bad fire. And
Speaking of firefighters for firefighters.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you to Tablet Command. They're making this show possible, our friends there, and they get it. And their solution integrates everything we're talking about. It really does. Those of you who are looking for training, reach out to me at trainfirefighters.com or info@trainfirefighters.com. Brian mentioned we have an open enrollment called the Chaos Train the Trainer workshop in his shop in a week or so. That's sold out right away. We're selling out all over the country. So thank you, everybody. And if you want to host a class, give me a shout. God bless you guys. God bless the fire service. And thank you all.